I am joined today by Judy May. Hello, Judy.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm not too bad. Now, you are involved with KOVA. That's one of the things I know of you about. Let's just start really simply with that one then, because KOVA is a name that some people may not know. I do now quite well. But what's KOVA all about?
Good question. So, KOVA is a company that I set up in 2019, and it's to be a light in the media space. So that's kind of the bottom line, is that we want to be a light in the media world. I've had the privilege over the last 20 years of being in the film industry, and so far, I'm the only in the UK. I'm the only Christian that I've met in the wider space.
Okay.
So I kind of thought, well, hang on a minute. We need light and dark places. Um, and so in 2019, God gave me the opportunity to set up a business on my own. Previously, I've been working for other organizations, and He gave me the opportunity to set up on my own, which I did. And at the time, I think our biggest clients were Lionsgate and Universal and 20th Century Fox at the time, and Entertainment One. So we worked on fabulous films like Tolkien, and I'm just trying to think of one back in the day. We did Tolkien, we did Everest with Jake Gyllenhaal. And what I mean when I say did is, so I think what we're doing is we are, for the film industry, they want targeted PR. So how do we actually get people to go to the cinema? And those are by that kind of high engagement, the high conversion is people who are actually interested in the themes that come up in the film. So what we would do is engage different organizations, 55 plus market, kids, in things like, I don't know, Minions or um uh DC League of Super Pets, or 1917, or so we've got lots and lots of great organizations that are kind of that kind of ground game. And I think that part of that for us is the church. So my message is always, the media is so big, it's so loud, it's so significant, and it's so influential. And we've got a responsibility as a church and as Christians to speak into that. So these films are going to come out anyway, whether we like it or not. So how do we therefore have a voice in that? Well, part of that is providing the church opportunities to see the film before it comes out, to partner with organizations to write resources around the film, and use the fact that the film is going to come out anyway to talk about Jesus.
Which something like King of Kings, I mean, we chatted with Scripture Union in Scotland who have utilized some of the film and they've made these amazing resources and so on and so forth. And it was fascinating to see how they tried to take the elements of the film, think, well, what can we do with this? And then generate something that a church can engage with. Now, King of Kings, I'm not going to say it's for children because I love a cartoon, but it's clearly aimed at a slightly younger audience. So then obviously you're
Yeah,
thinking children in Sunday schools with the classic kind of
yeah,
thing. But then they take the film, which is like you said, they're trying to find a way of us getting more of it. I remember The Matrix when it came out. This is a great, I love this story.
oh yeah,
I hope it's true. And there was a church next to one of the cinemas that was showing The Matrix, the first episode. And there was one of the guys was doing a bit of a preachy thing, and they did it on the red and the blue pill. And so his sermon was about, do you want to take the red pill or do you want to take the blue pill? Now, if you've not watched The Matrix, you've never heard of that, means nothing to you. If
mm,
you just walked out of The Matrix for the first time, entered that world and come out, you're going to be hooked into that because you know exactly what he was trying to say.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's really interesting because I think that so I think that the way that cinema works is, it's very commercial. It's seen as very commercial, and it's seen as entertainment. But I would say it's culture shaping. And so when you've got that kind of, you've got that narrative, and people behind who are pushing these films out are, they don't necessarily care about the cultural impact. they see a slate for the year, and then they think, well, okay, well, this one's going to make money. This one hopefully will. These ones definitely don't, but it doesn't matter because these, high profile ones will. And so I think, so we started in 2019, and then in 2021, we got through COVID. And, obviously we worked on The Chosen. And for those who don't know, it's a show, TV series, based on the life of Jesus. And we are now almost on season 6. It's releasing at the end of the year, with a theatrical film at the end of it in February next year. And so we then put that in cinemas. So as a team, I felt like God gave us the opportunity. I can remember the call so well. It was in our old house, and the guy on the call was like, we need to get this in cinemas in 6 weeks. And I was like, we could do that. And I was like, what? I guess we can. And the staff the next day, I was like, yeah, hi guys. I think what we're going to do is we're going to get this film in cinemas. So yeah, let's explore how you do that. But it was wonderful because, I think it's so layered, the media industry. So if you look at the US, there's a massive market for faith titles. It's established, there's a framework, there's an understanding, and there's expectation. In the UK, that is not the case. And I think the US market doesn't understand that. And the UK, we've never had a framework that works. And so what we've done is we've kind of grown since 2021, and we've had to form relationships with the cinema chains to say, look, give us a good time. Don't put it on 1 o'clock on a Sunday if you want people who go to church to see it. Give us some other times, give us some prime time slots, because we can fill it. Because actually what we're trying to say is that the church cares about that culture shaping. And so, many people don't know this, but the highest grossing genre in the UK is horror. And so, well, I want to stand up against that. And so therefore we bought other titles from the US that people wouldn't have seen unless we'd bought them. So Unsung Hero, Jesus Revolution, Drummer Boy. And I think we also then got, Sound of Freedom, Cabrini, King of Kings. And so I think for us, how do we, as a organization, how do we bridge the gap between the church and mainstream in a way that you have to play the game here? We're not like America. We're more cynical. We're not like the US. We don't have that framework. So what can that framework look like in a way that therefore impacts culture? And I think that's been a massive journey for us, which all of the staff would say they're pretty tired.
I don't know what it's like to get a film into a cinema. I have some notions of what that could be like, but I can definitely feel what you were saying about the staff of, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. And the mountain of work. But the thing is, if you don't take the chance and you don't think, yeah, do you know what? I think we can do that. Then you end up staying where you were. And yes, it could go wrong, but it could also go really right.
Yeah, and I think what's beautiful, God cares about the one, doesn't he? And so I think looking at the stories that we got from Jesus Revolution in particular, actually, the lives that were changed because we put that film in cinemas and we took the risk. I mean, it costs loads of money. We lost money. But the stories that come out of it are so beautiful, and they are about the one and the one and the one and the one. And I think that, that's been really powerful in a way that we can spur the team on to keep going. I think the tricky thing for us is, business model wise, just being honest, in the US, you make a Christian film, you sell it, everybody makes money, and then they make enough money to make something else and keep going. Whereas I think here we're cautious. We see the film industry as a bit of a threat, and a bit kind of secular. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of change that narrative, move the pendulum to say, no, 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 this is also a place. This is not against the church. This is the step before the church. So I'm going to get people that I don't feel I could invite to church, but I could invite to this. And then the next step is going to church. So I think what we're trying to do is work with churches actively to say, this is an opportunity to bring people to fill churches again, to see the kingdom come. And I think in this day and age, it's all visual, isn't it? Everything. So I think that's really, that's kind of at the heart of what I'm trying to do.
You see, in a similar vein, I'm really passionate that we play music, but we don't ever try and differentiate and say, well, this is Christian music, this is not Christian music, and well, this is an artist who says they're a Christian, but maybe that I don't know. We just play music because I think music is a really powerful medium. Now, we filter out bad language. That's it. That's all we're ever going to look at. And I'm sure some people think, well, what are you playing that for? Well, because it's not got bad language, and it's a really cracking bit of music.
Yeah.
Which means we can go from Nirvana and Bon Jovi to Sarah Reeves and Matthew West, across to Def Leppard, back to Sarah Reeves. We can go all over the place. You've got Manic Street Preachers, and you've got U2, and there's so many bands that we can play with absolutely superb music. But I want to make a point of never making a point of, well, what are they? It's like, well, they're musicians who make really good music. In a similar way, music, not video, screen stuff. I guess that's kind of a part of it. You're trying to say, look, this can be really good too.
I think when I'll tell you a little bit just about how the business came along. I was working for an organization who did resources for films for the church, and enabling churches to talk about popular culture. And I had a son who was born without any kidney or bladder function, and so I tried my best, but I was kind of in the sales department, and it was a busy job. And so he was very poorly for the first year, and then he was on dialysis, and he needed a kidney from my husband. And so, I couldn't carry on, working, and had to trust that was okay. And my friends were amazing. They did a kind of crowdfunding to support us through that time. So he, in 2018, in September, he had a kidney from my husband, and when my daughter was 8 weeks old. And he was in a different hospital to my son they can't prioritize one over the other just in case anything happened. And so anyway, it was a grueling journey to get there, to get him big enough to be able to have a kidney. They did 3D printing, and they put the kidney in, but I was cooled down after, 9 hours, and everything seemed all right. And then he had an internal bleed. They didn't know what was going on. So they took him back down to theatre. And bearing in mind, my husband was, in another hospital. And they brought him back at 2 a.m. and with his whole gut open. Because every time they closed him up, the kidney would stop working and he'd bleed. So they left him open, and I had this 8-week-old baby. My husband was in another hospital. My beautiful family were amazing. But I was just sort of stood there at 2 a.m, what am I doing? This is nuts. And so work was the last thing on my mind. And over time, so he had another subsequent 6 surgeries, and we made it home because we were in London at the time, and we made it home. after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it transferred to a hospital closer to us. And so, that was my main focus. I've got to keep these two kids alive. My husband, can't do anything. And that's what it was. And after he had the kidney, he was very, very poorly, and really poorly. And so there was one night where my daughter was at home with my mum. I was in hospital with my son, and I was in a nightie, I'd had a baby, and it was, it was weird being away from her. And I said, they were trying to bleed him. So renal children are really hard to bleed, because he was only 2, and so it's really hard to bleed. So it was 2 a.m, something had gone wrong, so they had to come and do bloods every half an hour. And so I said, well, God, if you care about me or this situation at all, then they'll get bloods first time, and I can settle him down again. And so they came in, and I was like, don't worry, God's got this. This is fine. Like, I've given God an ultimatum. It's fine. Like, he knows he knows I'm serious. And so they tried, and they didn't get it. Tried again, didn't get it. Tried a third time in his head and didn't get it. And so I said, get out, let me calm down. This is crazy. Just get out. 10 minutes isn't going to harm. But I was more cross at God. And I sat on the bed with this little baby covered in scars. At that point, I think he'd already had 15 surgeries. And I was just like, just so you know, God, for the record, I hate you. I hate you so much. And you can see me, and you're not doing anything. I haven't got a job. I've got a baby who needs me, and I'm not there. I've got this baby who we're trying to fix. It's not worked. I've got a husband who can't walk. This is so you know, I hate you, and I don't know where you are. And I heard an audible voice say to me, I am right here. I know what it's like to watch a son suffer. And, it was like, okay, well, fine, I'll keep going then. It was such a, to this day, he's 9 now. He's 10 this month, but that's what keeps me going. And so KOVA was born out of that situation. A couple of weeks later, I was tube feeding him, and I got a phone call from the VP of Fox Searchlight. And she said to me, Judy, where's the business? I need you to work on something. And I was like, mate, I'm tube feeding a child here. I'm like a different person now. I can't, the film industry is nothing to me. I just can't do this. And she was like, well, we need someone to work on Tolkien. And so I was like, well, it's gone. The business isn't there anymore. And she said, well, you do it then. And so I send her a Christmas present every year, because if it hadn't been for her, we wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be changing lives. We wouldn't be, selling over 500,000 tickets and putting the story of Jesus in cinemas if it wasn't for her. And she's not a Christian. She doesn't know. She does know, I've told her. But, I put the phone down. I said, look, I can't have a failing child and a failing business. Like, that's too much. So if it's from you, I'll do it. If it's not, I won't. And then COVID hits, and you're like, okay, the cinemas are closed, Lord. I'm trying to remember what I said before. And but anyway, here we are. We've got a beautiful team. And we've seen lives change in front of our eyes. We've seen resources created that point people to Jesus. We've seen cinemas filled with prayer meetings, and it's hard work and it's hard graft, and it's not easy. But I always go back to that moment where Jesus said, he gets it, he sees me. And actually, that's why we're doing it, aren't we? So other people get to see that.
Wow. Okay. I've been someone away who's been saying that. So many bits of that resonate with me particularly. We almost lost our third child. It was actually fourth child, because it was all going fine. It was all nice and calm. And then all of a sudden the alarm was going off, and I was like this particular position. And I'd never heard of this thing. I almost lost our son. We almost lost my wife because of this thing. And it was one of God's moments, because the hospital was enormous. The maternity ward was vast. And Joe was the only patient for a bit. And so it was the doctor with the smallest hands, which I'm told was pivotal of no one dying. So he calls our son Peter, because he was a rock, because he came through. And I remember, this is the thing, they do a little mark when you go home. Crying, I remember this. They mark off all the wounds that are on the child, and they say, we're going to have to do more than one sheet. We've not done this before. But if the midwife or the social worker calls around to check up on you at so many days, they're going to think you've been battering this child, and we want to protect you. And they ran out of room for all the scratches and the scrapes and the bruising and the cuts. And it's just, you get through that and you think, but why? But then you look at it differently, you think, but the hospital was empty that night. And all the staff were saying, where are the patients? We just don't know where all the mums are who's supposed to be giving birth tonight, sort of thing. And it meant we had the entire ward pretty much, and we had the best doctor and the best midwife and the most experienced that came in, which was phenomenal. So you go through those things, but then you look through the other side and think, well, yeah, but God was there. You don't feel like in the moment, does it?
No.
But then you know he is. I want to come back to the audible voice thing as well, because that's something that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, right, whatever. Now, I'm going to be honest. I've heard God's audible voice at least 3 times in my life. Everyone was massively pivotal. Part of what I'm doing today with Pure is because God spoke to me in a way that I'm not going to say didn't happen, because I know it did. Every time somebody hears about the first time that God spoke to me, they said, well, what did he sound like? And I always have the same response, which I'm curious about you, which is I said, I have no idea. I don't care what he sounded like. I care about what he said, which was far more powerful than any potential accent that he may have had. What was that encounter like for you? Because I know that I cried for hours after that, that God wanted to speak to me.
I would say, and I've actually had a conversation with somebody at a huge distributor in the UK about it, and she's not Christian. She cried her eyes out when I told her, and I don't even know how we got onto it. But her question wasn't, she's a mum, and her question wasn't, what does his voice sound like? She wasn't a cynical, like, she wasn't a Christian trying to like get you to prove it. Her point in it was, you couldn't have made that up, because that's not the headspace you were in. I was angry, so angry. I was so tired, and I was so done. I was like, I can't, this is just, I had blood on my Mickey Mouse nightie. Like, they gave it to me. That was not my choice, by the way. Just for the record. And, I had blood on it, and I was holding this tiny child that we had to be given this, we were given at the hospital this golden opportunity to give him a kidney, and it hadn't worked. So that was it then. That was it. It's not worked. Yeah. And he had, subsequent surgeries. He had about another 15. And so at the time, I was not thinking, what would God say? You know what I mean? I was thinking, you're out, I'm done. And actually to say that, and I think it's like, I'm laying in the dirt with you. And that isn't what I was thinking. It's totally disarmed me. Yeah. So in terms of what it sounded like, I don't know. Like you say, I don't know. But it certainly wasn't where my head was at. And it certainly isn't something that I could have thought of in the time, or from then. It just wouldn't occur to me to think that.
No, I would agree with that. I remember I was really angry at God, similar to you. Spring Harvest, which is a very big Christian sort of festival every year. And I was there, I was about 15, 16. I was in the middle of this room, it was completely deserted. And I remember saying to God, where are you? I had lost dad walked out when I was 4. I had real issues. Any guy who came along, ruffled my head and said, how you doing, son? That never went down well with me, because you're not my
Yeah.
dad. And a few of them now who became friends later on said, yeah, we realized that was the wrong thing to say. But I remember God saying, you're my son, which was the worst thing. And yet it was the best thing. Because it disarms you, doesn't it? It takes away all the anger. God, I didn't know I was going to cry so much for this one. It disarms all the anger that I had and all the kind of absence of a dad. And all of a sudden, like I said, I wasn't in that headspace because that's the worst thing that God could have said if I'd have planned it.
Yeah.
It changed my life though because it was the best thing he could have said.
I love it. I love the way God does this. Like, I don't know, a connection that we're having in this interview, the way that he encourages me. You know, I'm actually having some counselling at the minute just because of the stuff with my son. That, you know, it's been years and I haven't had any, and I think over the last year I've sort of reached a point where I was thinking, all right, I need to address some of this. And so it's today. And I love the way that some of the stuff you're saying is this, it really rings true of my counselling session that was 3 hours ago, you know, and then also the way that we're encouraging each other as a parent, as a follower of Jesus, and also it's that somebody, you know, the most humble, loving man of all time ever. And having a glimpse of that gives so much. And I think that's, you know, it's really encouraging to hear other people's stories, I think, which is kind of why I wanted to share this as well.
Well, this is the thing, though. I find it interesting also about your point about the cynical thing of what did it sound like? Was it really real? Because when I haven't mentioned this to many because I think most people think he's off his head. I don't care anymore. But I think most people who have not had that kind of encounter with Jesus are more easily saying, oh, that's really amazing. You know, what did that do to your life? Whereas I think for a lot of Christians, if they've not had that, it's like, well, I haven't had that, so you haven't had that, so therefore it doesn't exist. And I think there is an openness to who God is. Sometimes it's greater outside of the church than in, which is why cinema, movies, films are such a good medium for the gospel. Whether it's, you know, a film that comes out of a church written by a bunch of Christians and it's got a Christian thing, maybe. But actually, there are so many other films where you can see God so much through the actors and the characters in the film and the plot, and yeah, it's amazing.
We brought out a film in October called Sketch, and for the team, it was like a lot of our favourite titles to work on, and it had a wide release, and we did it over Halloween season as a kind of alternative for a family offering. Were there prayers in it? No. Was there a vicar in it? No. Was there any mention of God? Not, no. But it was a story made by Christians, and it starred Tony Hale from Arrested Development. He was just an amazing guy. And the story was about grief, single parenting, loss, and I would say, what's your hope? Where's your hope? And it was so, like, it's kind of like Goosebumps meets Jurassic Park. Like, it was fitting for Halloween. You know, it was spooky and the actors were amazing and it was funny. So it was no mention of God at all. And actually, it was so wonderful because it was a way in which you could talk. It would give you that kind of like, okay, well, how do I process grief? How do I talk about stuff that's really difficult? Well, this girl in the film drew, so her spooky monsters came to life. And the whole thing was like, well, the bad's got to cancel out the good. And actually, like, that's in the heart of everybody. You want the good to cancel out the bad, don't you? And so I think for this film, it gave us such an opportunity to reach beyond the church. So therefore, we had partnerships with brands that are not in the church, but also having that message to say, there's something good, this is good, cancelling out the bad. And so it was an amazing opportunity, I think, for us as a team, because it wasn't on the nose. It was And I would say our British culture, we don't respond to that. We don't, so I think there's 67 million people in the world, sorry, not the world, in England, in the UK, sorry, and 3 million go to church. You're fishing in a tiny pool, really. Actually, we need to be going beyond the church. We need to be equipping the church, but then going beyond that. And so we're trying to equip with good content that if we don't bring it, if KOVA doesn't buy it and bring it here, it doesn't come, because the big studios don't care. They're not massive grossing titles. And so I think it's been a, really interesting journey to see what the cinema's like, what the church likes, what the people who don't go to church like, what Gen Z like, with this kind of like spiritual exploration. And I think that films and media space, unless somebody holds court, it's going to continue to be a massive cultural influence that doesn't have Christians backing it.
Which I think is really true.
Yeah, and that's not to say, obviously there's broadcasters and Christian radio stations and Christian filmmakers, but I think that it's being able to stand up and say, I'll bring that here for the gospel to be shown. And then also being a cultural translator to be able to say, well, how is it going to land here? So, for example, for The King of Kings, in the US, it was very much Christian film, Christian story. There was enough. Christians are going to go and see it. It's going to make enough money, cover its costs. Whereas here, our message was Charles Dickens. It's based on a story that Charles Dickens told his kids. And so, because we need to go beyond the church here, because we don't have that, that cultural kind of push, I suppose. And so I think it's been really interesting kind of, and the team will say we're getting to know our audience, and how do we continue in this space when these films aren't actually very popular, and being able to set expectations for the US filmmakers, but also being able to change lives here. And I guess, we bring our loaves and 2 fishes, right? And we say, Lord, well, we've done this. It's about the one, and we've got to trust you in that. And I think at the moment, the industry is very much about the one. I think if it's going to grow and multiply, then we need to be really wise in what we're buying, how we speak about it, when we put it out there, relationships we're forming, so that we are winsome, we are Esther's in speaking, because actually we're talking to the secular world all the time.
But it does matter. You see, the people that have been most critical of what we do at Pure are churches or Christian people. The ones that are most excited may probably have never stepped foot in a church. They love the fact that we do the hard work of finding songs that haven't got bad language in. And I find it fascinating, the sort of the confliction between the two, who loves it and who's given us the greatest grief. Because we're not trying to be a Christian radio station. I'm not interested in doing that. There's loads. UCB Premier, they're brilliant at what they do. We don't need to imitate what they're doing. What we're doing is very different. And I love the fact that we are doing something different, because we're just saying, well, look, we don't want bad language. We'll cut that out. Which means there's a huge amount of radio stuff that we can play. Great music. Long songs. It's a small thing that seems irrelevant, really, but it's not. We play longer songs that are 6, 8, 10 minutes long. Why? Well, radio doesn't do that. Well, why not? They're great songs. Let's play them anyway. We make a point of it. It may not be in the general mix, but I love playing the long songs. The Led Zeppelin, was it 10 minutes? Kashmir or something? It's a great song.
Yeah.
So why not play it in full? Why are we trying to shrink it down to what people think will be best? Actually, let's play it in full. And I think let people enjoy it for what it is, rather than trying to give them the clean version, the sanitized version, the not too religious version. And actually, God speaks through everybody and everything in every situation.
Yeah. And I think also, like, I don't know, like, we're in the world anyway. We don't have to be of it, but we're in it. And I think that, I want us all to work together. I want, KOVA to work with churches, to work with organizations, to not build kingdoms, but to build the kingdom here. And to be free with information, to trust Jesus about where he's heading, where he's leading, where we're supposed to be. And I think that's been a real journey for us. So I think, just being honest, so the last 3 years, I think God has brought our focus back onto him, because it's from him for him. Because I think it's very easy to become like any other film distributor, and it's easy, but actually then we're not doing what we said we were going to do. So okay, well, this last year has been kind of like, okay, bring it back to me, this is where I am. And I love the people in the UK and Ireland, and so we've got to be different. And so it's been, it's very humbling. And I think, in leading that and leading the team, it's been very humbling, and but in a beautiful way. And it's the only place that we want to be. So, when I'm looking ahead to what's ahead for the next year, I'm totally reliant on him. We've got a couple of films we're looking at the minute. We've got there's one film called He Calls Me Daughter, which is about it's more of a documentary that we're putting out on digital platforms about real life people who had a penny drop moment that Jesus is their father. And that, it's beautiful. And so I watched it and I was like, it's beautiful. We can't not bring that. Okay, Lord, I'm going to have to trust you for provision. We're going to get that on Amazon Prime and Apple TV and Roku, and alike. And so it's going to be fabulous. And then there's another film called Light of the World, which is a animation about the story of Jesus. And it's wonderful. It's very kind of topical in its animation. A lot of the big studios are kind of going back to that 2D stylized animation, and so it's like that, and it's really moving. A lot of our team, often with our team, we watch it with our kids or teenagers or whoever. Well, I'm like, right, guys, sit down, what do you think? And that's it's a good test. But I think that's been a really, we've got some fun stuff coming up that I don't think we'll get a theatrical release in cinemas, but we're going to make it available for people to watch at home. So, let's see what Jesus does. We're watch this space, I suppose. But we're committed to, like I said, holding a court in this area because nobody else is. And I feel called to do it because it's basically only in God's strength.
Amen to that. I want to come back to some of this stuff. You've talked a lot about faith, especially with your children. What was faith for you growing up? Were you surrounded by people who were just encouraging your faith? Was it more of a battle of what is this thing for me? How would that work out for you?
So my dad was as a vicar. So I grew up in a church plant over in Suffolk. So he trained when I was younger, when I was a baby, and then we did a church plant over in Suffolk in my childhood, which was amazing. I mean, we were right in the thick of it, in a new estate, and different church buildings. I was actually thinking about it today. I was just trying to revisit like the church building that he then built. still going strong, which is wonderful, and still love the people there. And then we moved to Australia. He did a job swap when I was a teenager, which obviously didn't go down very well at the time, but it was amazing. Great life opportunity. And then we moved to another city, and he was a vicar for 12 years until then he went to go and work for an organization for CPAS. So my parents, my mum's got a Christian charity helping people with eating disorders. So there's some fabulous role models kind of set me up for some wonderful things. So yeah, I've been a Christian. I gave my life to Jesus when I was 7, after a car accident. We had a car accident as a family in the south of France, and that was I can remember it really well at New Wine, and with Captain Allen doing the kids' work, and I got the gift of tongues when I was 7, and I had a massive ball of bubble gum in my mouth, and the lady was like, I can remember saying, "Do you want to spit that out?" I was like, "Yeah, okay." So I've had a wonderful, Christian upbringing, real life though, like not sheltered, it was real life, and I'm eternally grateful for that.
So a bit of traveling in there, Australia, obviously, quite far away from the UK. Yeah. But then you have this call to do KOVA, and you get 2 choices, right? We've had the same one when we were asked to do the radio. You get the opportunity to say, "No, that's not for me, God. I'm sure you're making the big mistake." For me personally, I was just saying there are so many better people, far more equipped. And when 3 people said the same thing within the same week with the same words from different parts of the world, you're thinking, I think God might be trying to get my attention here. And you still have a choice, right? Because he's gentle as God, and he doesn't make you. He just let me walk with you. When you look back to 2019, obviously COVID, I mean, that's difficult for many. You get through COVID, you get through all the life stuff you've got. You're now in a place where you're looking ahead into the future. Have you felt God the whole way through that process of beginning KOVA, running it through COVID, which was difficult for everybody, to the point where can you look back and think, well, I have been walking with God pretty well through this?
No way. No way. No way. It has been really hard. And I think it's so funny because I think that God cares about who you are, not what, rather than what you're achieving. He cares about who you are. And I think that God's used the business and my son to show me who he is. Because I'm I'm an all or nothing kind of gal. I'm, determined and motivated and fast. And so I think in the chaos of kind of a lot of the stuff that I've chosen, he's used it as a reminder of how kind and loving he is. But I haven't always seen that. I think so I'll give you an example. So last year's from September to December, I was waiting on a cancer diagnosis for my son, and it was because of the medication he's on, it's way more likely, and he had something removed, and I just had to wait for ages. And every day I was at work and I was like Googling like the how can I rephrase this sentence to give me some more information? How can I'm in the office and I'm pretending to work, but I'm like, no, I need some more info. And then I come home and I'm angry, I'm annoyed. I'm like, and I think that how do you, how am I therefore a mum to 5 children when I get home, a kind of CEO of a business when I'm in the office, and what does that leave me at all? And so I think it was an excruciating journey of a reminder, and that's what brought the business back to Jesus, though. Because we were in the weeds of doing kind of conducting business the way that other distributors do it. And I think, although it seems extreme, I don't think, it's like, I'm going to use this situation. I didn't bring it, but I'm going to use it to bring you back to me. Not because I'm angry or anything, but because I can see you doing it in your strength and I want you to do it in mine. And so I think that by Christmas, and the diagnosis was negative, which was an absolute miracle. We were prepared for the alternative. And I feel like Jesus was like, we live in a fallen world, bad things happen. And, we don't have to get into the theology of all of that, but, we are in a fallen world. I do have a poorly child, but in that, come back to me. And he's not saying it because he wants all the glory. He's saying it because he loves me and he did what he did for me. And it's about the one. And I feel like, if he hadn't have done that, it's like a counseling session, but if he hadn't have done that for me, then I can't then lead my family in the business. And it's a reminder. And so I think, we're in the world, like it's hard. Easy, quick fixes, easy access to stuff. It's hard, but actually he calls us to be different. And in his grace, in his humility, in his kindness, he uses his stuff to bring us back to under the shadow of his wings, where we are actually whole and safe, because nothing else provides that.
I love that. I can sit and listen to all this stuff all day. I really can. But I also need to wrap it up. I think what's fascinating is I'm chatting with somebody who's had some very similar experiences, very different scenarios and situations, and yet God carries us through those hardships. And one of the things I've been going through the last 6 months is realizing that it's about the one, which is one of the things I'm always saying. It's about the one listener or the one reader, because that's what matters. People matter. And if we're not careful, we end up copying what everybody else is doing that might be vaguely similar to us. And the thing is, God's plans to us are insane and crazy. And yet they work, because look at what happened to Jesus. And it's really hard, isn't it? And I can see the hard as you're talking of, but this is how you're supposed to do it, God. And this is what we're meant to do. But actually God's saying, yeah, but I want you to go that way, because that's the better journey. That's the better way. And actually the thing over all that is, in order that you can become more like Jesus. Corrie ten Boom. It's one of the most, I love this phrase from Corrie ten Boom.
I love her.
She's great, isn't she? And it's one of the things about this journey prepares us for heaven. So all the difficult stuff that she went through with the Nazi prison camps and all, losing her dad and her sister, she looks back at that and says, well, it's preparing me for heaven. I'm not sure I can quite say that yet through some of the hardships that I've gone through. I'm not there. I'm going to quote her. But actually, this life is preparation for the heaven. And I think that's important, and all the stuff that you've been through. And you're saying, from a business point of view, this is mad. Some of the stuff you're trying to do is really expensive. And why would you want to do that? Well, because God's asked us. Yeah. And it's not about the success. It's about obedience. My favorite scripture is to obey is better than sacrifice. Everything we do at Pure, it's because I'm trying to obey God the best I can. I make loads of mistakes, but I'm trying to be obedient and faithful to what I believe he's asked us to do. And we keep pressing forwards through doors that open before us, not because it's logical. The much of what we do is completely mad. But it's what I know God's asked us to do, and we're seeing the fruit of that. And I think you're seeing, in the same way you're seeing the fruit through KOVA. I've got to wrap this up, which I don't want to do because I could go for another hour with this. But I didn't expect to be sobbing my heart out all through this. You've got loads of films obviously coming out this year, and there's other stuff that KOVA's involved in as well. What can we look forward to in the next 6 months that you're thinking, do you know what, this is really exciting?
Great question. So I think we've got The Chosen, which is starting on Amazon in November. And then we've got a theatrical finish to the series in cinemas in February next year. Massive opportunity for evangelism for churches. We also have The Resurrection, which is the Mel Gibson title. Again, massive opportunity for churches to book to go and see it. We'll be doing some work on that. So if you follow our socials, KOVA International. I'm like, Emma, can you tell me what they are? I can't remember. KOVA International on Instagram and Facebook. We've also got Cave by KOVA. So Cave by KOVA is Christian Association of Visual Entertainment. So if you search Cave by KOVA on Instagram and Facebook, we'll keep you up to date. That's kind of like our Christian community, where we're trying to enable churches and individuals to have extra information about and kind of first-hand information about some of this stuff. We've got Light of the World and He Calls Me Daughter, which I've said, and we've got David, the animation, which will be at the end of the summer holidays. And then we've also got Narnia next year that we're working on. And then there's a couple more so that we can maybe say in time. But if you follow our socials, the KOVA International and Cave by KOVA, especially if you're interested in Christian content, then the Cave one is the one, and we'll give you all the extra information. And there's some exciting stuff. We run red carpets in London, and we do nationwide screenings. We do some really fun stuff. We've got some incredible merchandise. We're showing up for a lot of Christian festivals this year. We've got the Chosen Encounters that we're initiating, which is helping churches use the content of the Chosen to talk about Jesus and invite people in. There's so much resource, visual entertainment that we can use to bring people back to the church. So that's kind of our heart, and that's what we're pushing. So that's kind of a summary of what we've got going on the next 6 months.
Cool. I really need to finish this. If someone's going through some difficult times, what inspiration can you give them? You've been through some really hard stuff. Clearly, you're going through some hard stuff. Clearly, I did 18 months of CBT PTSD. It's hard when you have to go through that stuff. For folk that are listening, thinking, yeah, it's all right for her. She got through her problem. How would you help inspire them to keep going?
Good question. I would say I'm not through it. I would say the hardest thing is that I've had, 9 years of hardship, and I've got another 9 and to infinity, where I'm giving a child stuff that I don't want to give him. I don't want to give him the responsibility of the things that he's got. I don't want to give him illness. I want to give him fun. And I think in that, the only answer is Jesus. Are you either, and before this call, I was listening to some Maverick City, and I was on my knees in my living room, and I said, I'm in. Because up to a lot of the time I say I'm out. I'm not doing it. I'm out. But today I've said I'm in because he sees me. And actually, ultimately, that is what faith is. It's the hope in the not yet, and believing that God is who he says he is. And so I would encourage people to reach out to friends, reach out to colleagues, reach out to your church, reach out to me. I don't know, go on socials, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to speak to people about the reality of walking this crazy life out with and in brokenness.
Judy from KOVA, thank you. I did not expect to be blubbering and snotting my way through the interview. But the thing is, life is not clean and it's not pretty. It can be amazing fun and it can be messy, but that is life. And that's what makes life exciting. And just endorsing what you said, yeah, Jesus is enough through the hardships. I've still got hardships like you have, but you have to keep putting one foot in front of the other because you have to. You just need to keep going. Yeah. Right. Judy.
In his strength. That's the thing. So thank you, Andy, for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
In his strength, absolutely. Go to God. He'll help you. Judy, KOVA International and K by KOVA, thank you kindly for your time.
Pure Men's Mag is under starters orders and raring to go. Yes, the June edition even still has that minty fresh smell of anticipation as the amazing team make sure everything is tickety-boo just for you. We take a moment to focus on Dave Kingswood, who talks about fostering and why men need to get involved. We've got paper subscriptions from £48 for 6 months or digital subscriptions from £3 a month. Just head on over to puremensmag.com, www.puremensmag.com, and get yourself a copy. These are made AI free by men for men.